For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Manny. I'm a certified financial planner and I am a money and happiness coach. In this video, I want to talk about incentive stock compensation and options, particularly what happens to those options after you've been laid off. In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer some of your questions around your options, help you identify the information you're looking for in that plan agreement, and also have a discussion about whether or not you should exercise those options at this point. You know, if you live in the Bay Area or work in the tech sector, you're very much aware of the recent layoffs across the tech sector, and a bunch of my friends have been affected, so I thought I'd make this video just to help explain what their options are with their incentive stock compensation. So dear friend, I'm going to make this video as if I'm talking directly to you. Okay, so imagine this scenario. You've worked for this company. They say, thank you for working here. We're gonna give you options. That's part of your compensation. You know, a few years later down the road, they're like, oh, actually we need to lay you off now. So at the highest level, you might be asking yourself, like, what are my legal options at this point? Unfortunately, the law does not provide any kind of protection for your options. There is an authoritative resource that was given to you when you received your options. So you're gonna be looking for what's called a plan agreement. In that plan agreement, you're gonna find the information that pertains to handling of your stock options in the event of a layoff. Let's take a step back. Options are a promise from the person giving them to you that says you're allowed to buy shares of our company at a discounted rate. So it's a promise. It's not the actual stock. When you exercise the options, then you are buying the stock at that set price. Got that? Because that's key. One of the first questions I'm gonna ask is, are the options vested? So for those of you who don't remember, vested means from the date that they gave you those options, there's a period of time that you have to wait until they become exercisable. If something is vested, that means that it's available for you to exercise and buy. So essentially, the whole point behind one of the points, I'm gonna take this watch off because it keeps making noise. And I talk with my hands. Okay, one of the reasons why a company might give you options in the first place is to incentivize you to stay. And they do that with a vesting schedule. So upon being hired for this company, they offered you 10,000 options. The options vest over a period of 4 years. So every year, a quarter of that becomes available for you to purchase. That would incentivize you to stay all 4 years so that you can get all 10,000 options. Get that? So what happens to those options that are not vested? Let's say that was the vesting schedule, 10,000 options over 4 years, and you are laid off in year 2. What happens to those other 5,000 options? If you've been terminated by a company, it's likely that you've already lost the ability to exercise those options, but there are exceptions, and that's why you have to take a look at that plan agreement. In some cases, a layoff might not be considered a termination, and in that case, you might have some wiggle room about what you can do with those options. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna be looking down a little bit to take some notes. Okay, so I'm like up in this tree. Let me tell you about the finances. Okay, sorry. Okay. In some cases, a layoff might not amount to termination. So if you continue to work for the company as an outside consultant, or if you're placed on furlough, for example, these situations could have different impacts on the status of your options. So it all depends upon the content of your plan agreement. So take a look at that. If you have like a continuing connection with someone in HR, like check the provisions that could potentially preserve the options in this way. Another thing to consider is what type of options or shares you have. So compensation plans can provide employees several different types of equity. What happens when employment is terminated depends upon what type of equity is involved. An ISO or an ISO is an incentive stock option. Incentive stock options can be granted only to employees of the issuing company, and they receive special tax treatment. When an employee exercises an ISO, the cost of exercising the option is called the strike price. It's commonly below the current fair market value. So remember what I was saying? Like, they're offering it to you at a discount. That's the whole point. That's what makes them special, right? It's like if the stock is $100 on the open market for other regular regular people, but you as like a star employee gets to buy it at $75, like that would be the advantage, because on day one of exercising that option, you already have a $25 bargain element, which I will get into. Okay, so you buy it at $75, that's the strike price, and the fair market value is up here at 100. So this difference in between the 75 and the 100 is called the bargain element. So what's the bargain element in this scenario? $25. So when you're exercising an ISO, you don't necessarily trigger a tax event. At that point, you're just buying a stock, like as if you were buying any other kind of stock. Typically, a tax consequence with any kind of stock purchase happens after you sell it. So the mere act of buying it doesn't necessarily put you at a disadvantage tax-wise for that tax year. So you exercise those options. So now you're holding the share. So it went from a promise, when it was an option, it was a promise, but now you exercise the option, so now it's a stock. So now you have the stock. If you hold on to that stock for at least 1 year after the year of exercise and at least 2 years after the date it was granted to you. So when the company said, we're gonna grant these options to you on that date, that's the date that's part of this calculation. You need 2 years from that grant date from the date of sale. And then you need 1 year from the date of exercise from the date of sale to get special tax treatment. What you're looking for is the cheapest possible tax treatment for that bargain element. Remember that $25? So in our scenario, option was purchased at 75, it sells for 100, and let's say this is 2 years after, right? We met those 2 time requirements. So now you have that $25 gain. Now you get to treat that as a long-term capital gain. So depending on your income level, that's gonna determine what your capital gains rates are. And I'll be sure to talk about capital gains rates in another video. So IRS rules stipulate that holders of ISOs have up to 90 days after termination to exercise vested incentive stock options. Individual plan agreements may give employees more time than this. However, ISOs that aren't exercised within the 90 days lose their special tax treatment and become non-qualified stock options, or NSOs. I love this new blurry background because you can't see how messy everything is. So non-qualified stock options are usually given to people who are like consultants or vendors or people who are not technically employees of the company. So the trick with that is those folks, if they have vested options and they exercise them on the date that they exercise those options, they all of a sudden have now taxable income in the year of exercise. It's very likely that in these plan agreements for the NSOs that the people who hold them have up to 10 years to exercise them. So from the date of grant to the date of exercise, they have 10 years to decide what they want to do. So employees that have vested shares of restricted stock retain rights to those shares at termination. So any unvested shares are typically lost though at termination for those folks. When you see language like repurchase or forfeiture or redemption in your plan agreement, those are provisions pertaining to a clawback. So basically that means that the company that offered you these options has the ability, whether you're terminated or laid off, they can buy back those shares from you. So the company might say, we're gonna take back those shares and we're gonna pay you what you paid at exercise, or we'll pay you the fair market value of those shares. In that case, if your company is pre-IPO, that might significantly hinder the ability for you to make like a profit from those shares. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's say you take a look at that plan agreement and in it, it says that your layoff doesn't necessarily prohibit you from exercising those options. Do you exercise them at that point? There's a lot to consider in that question, and that's a perfect time to get yourself in front of a financial planner, because hopefully what that financial planner will be able to do is take a look at your entire financial picture, be able to help you figure out how much of an impact this specific area of your investments is going to impact like your entire retirement plan. So what you want to do at this point is hire a financial planner and a tax planning professional, and typically if they don't have one, we're connecting them to one, and we work hand in hand with the tax professional to do like forecasting. So let's say the recommendation is to exercise those options. Client has cash around that they're able to put towards that purchase. Now they have these shares we'll put together a schedule so that they'll know the appropriate time to sell those shares. Obviously, we're trying to meet those 2 time requirements, a year from exercise and 2 years from grant. So you want to have a tax professional that is very adept at calculating the alternative minimum tax. We don't have time to go into it in this specific video, but that is an additional tax levied upon folks who have certain high incomes. Typically, when you're exercising an option or you're in that echelon of income, you might already be in the AMT territory, but exercising options might push you like even further into that territory. So you want to know what the tax consequences are for any kind of transactions you want to do with your options. So for example, remember when I was talking about those ENSOs? When you exercise those ENSOs, that is like getting a check from the company on the day that you have exercised those shares. But instead of getting a check, you get shares, and it's the federal and state taxes look at that as income. So that's for ENSOs. So, I mean, there's a lot to consider, right? If you've just been laid off and maybe you do not have a lot of cash reserve, maybe it just does not make sense at that point for you to exercise those options, because you're going to need that cash to meet your monthly living expenses until you can find your next job. But if you find yourself where you have a adequately funded emergency fund and you have options you want to exercise, then why not? Typically, the employee, you know better than I do the viability of the company, like whether or not the company you think in your own view will do well. I'm not talking about insider trading. I'm talking about just from what you know about where the company is going, like profitability wise, revenue wise. You know, those things should help inform your decision about whether or not you should exercise your options. It's just like buying any other kind of stock. Is this a good company, a healthy company worth investing in? That you'll probably know better than your advisor because you work at the firm or worked at the firm. So that's it for my video on options. Like I said in the video, I should talk about AMT in one of these videos, and when I do, you'll want to be notified of it. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and then click that bell. That's your notifications button. It'll tell you when that video comes out. Also, if you can give me a like and a comment below, what that does is it tells YouTube that you liked this video and you'd like to see more of this kind of content. And with that, I'll leave it here, and I wish you prosperity and abundance in all things today and every day. I'll see you later. Bye.